How does a professional technician repair a threading into which a screw goes, which has been stripped? Okay, let's go over that. This screw here is carbon steel, but it goes into aluminum. So if, when you put the screw in, you don't compress here on the mouthpiece to flatten it out, because it's made with curvature, of course, to provide down pressure here in this area. You don't do that and you start screwing the screw, you're going to start buggering the screws, the screw threads in this aluminum cone. Okay. Or somebody might put a screw in, but they don't turn it backwards first this way, and here click, and then take it in. So it's actually the screw threads are not aligned properly for that reason, and that will strip one. Okay. Or you could do the same game here, where over tightening a reed plate screw, which is right here, one of these here can strip out. So what would you do? Okay. This is a repair kit. And what you got to do is you very precisely drill a little bit bigger hole than originally it would have been to take the original screw, because those threads are screwed up now. So you would use first a drill that's the right size to smooth a new hole. And then this is a tapping unit. And a tapping unit has little teeny threads here and then kind of an empty section here. And as you twirl this down, it makes new threads. Okay? So this is a threading. These come in tool and die kits, threading kits, and it'll come in a variety of sizes, either metric or English. But then of course you need screws, because if you're, in this case, if you drill out the stripped part like a reed plate, you go a little bit bigger, and then you tap it with this thing. And actually I use a teeny wrench on this when I'm actually bringing it down. But then you got to have other size screws, because it's not going to take the original size screw that it had. It's going to be a little bit bigger. That's how it's done. Now, I have jerry-rigged them, where I've used a screw that I just had in my extra screws. It was a little bit bigger, and maybe shorten it with a Dremel tool a little, which ain't easy because you got to fix the threads and then take that into the hole. And sometimes a jerry-rig approach like that can work well if you don't happen to have, a drill and a tapper for the size that you're working with. But you can run into other problems too with this game, where you might, as an example, if you stripped out this screw here that goes into the aluminum, if you tried to use a bigger screw, it isn't going to lay flush, because the tapered part is going to be bigger on the bigger screw, and it will stick up above the mouthpiece. So now you got to come in with a drill press, and you're going to have to grind down a little bit into this mouthpiece. So I wish I could say to you, this is easy and simple and there's no problem. It's not like that. If you may get lucky and be able to jerry-rig if you've got a bunch of screws sitting around, but you'll probably have to change the length. And the only way you can really repair threads on something where you cut it or grind it to shorten it, you have to run a nut up in this area and then twirl it off, and also probably do a little bit of smoothing with a very fine stone if you're trying to repair threads. And of course, I'm pretending this is a screw and the threads are screwed up, and you cut it off maybe, and because you want it to be the right size. Maybe it's a little too long if you're just jerry-rigging it. And then to get this to go in, you'd have to repair those threads a little bit with a stone to smooth it, and then have a nut and twirl it off. Again, that's a tough jerry-rig too. But the answer is that it's like a lot of times you'll have materials that when you're working on an engine, a screw that goes into the aluminum is going to snap off. If you're not lucky and you can't use a tool, an extractor, to extract out that screw, then you're going to have to drill, and then again, assuming your extractor doesn't work, then you're going to have to drill a bigger hole, tap it with a much larger tap, of course, than this little teeny one I showed you, and go in with another screw. That's the way it's done. Now, in my opinion, I mean, if you were in a situation like where you just couldn't get parts and couldn't get screws and couldn't order them from anywhere, you can order any screw, any size, pretty much, if you go online and find a resource that offers parts like that. And typically, a manufacturer will not offer you a screw like this that's one size bigger. It won't be available. But if you absolutely had to do something on your own, you might be able to use metal epoxy and fill the hole in this comb. If I were going to do that, I would personally drill out a little bit larger hole into the comb. Try to rough it on that inside with a drill at an angle, and then I'd come in with metal epoxy for an engine, and I would fill it. And I would kind of let it dry, and then I would precision drill and go that route. Don't forget, when a screw strips in wood, what you do is you drill a dowel hole. You drill a hole, and then you have a wood piece that's exactly the right size that you glue in, and then chop it off and smooth it a little bit. So that's what you do, and then you drill, into that fresh wood, and you can then put another screw. And of course, when you're working with wood, you can oftentimes use even something as simple as an index card, which actually can hold the screw, although it will not hold it necessarily in the exactly correct position. You might have to put a little spacer on both sides. Those are jerry-rig repairs, though, and not great. If you want to do it right, you're going to fill it and you're going to re-drill it. Again, for someone who's very, very handy and has worked with their hands, this type of a repair is pretty doable. It's very common for screws to strip on a harmonica. I'd say your best bet to not even get into that world of problems is, when you're putting a screw in, it should go in like butter with just no pressure. If you're having problems, it's not aligned properly, and you're damaging stuff when you screw it in. So as long as you're very, very gentle when you set these screws in, you probably won't have a big problem. But the harmonica is a complex device, mechanism, and it's made very, very precisely, like a watch kind of type thing, the fit of the parts. You got to make sure when you're coming in that you're not coming in with too much pressure. When you're stripping threads, it will be hard to turn the screwdriver. So if you're turning a screw into your harmonica and it turns hard, you're stripping the material, the thread. Oftentimes problems here and here, they'll go bad over 3 or 4 tightenings. The first time they still kind of hold, second time a little bit looser. The third time you go in and you've messed it up, it's even worse, and then finally it just spins free and it's shut. But I hope that this gives you at least some feel for, how do people deal with this stuff that have the right equipment and have access to the right parts. They're going to use some of these methods I've talked about.